I'm joined by Martin Gauss, Chief Executive of AirBaltic, to discuss how the airline has tackled the torrid situation brought on by the coronavirus pandemic and what measures are being implemented to ride the recovery. So welcome, Martin. Thank you for joining us for this chat. So just to give us a scene setter, really, Martin, can you briefly quantify just how badly AirBaltic was affected by the virus, and how the operations were kind of contained during that dreadful market condition we had in the first part of the year?
We had actually, to start a little bit earlier, we had 2 record months, January, February, and by the end of February we saw some signs that the booking dynamics would slow down. Then we formed an action group to address the issue, because it was obviously it would come from COVID, but then we were hit, I think, as hard as everybody else, with maybe a difference that we at a very early stage stopped flying completely on the 17th of March, which then gave us time to work out what we would do one day if we could start flying again. Today we know we had to stop flying completely for 2 months, and 2 months and 1 day, and then we started again with just 4 aircraft, and now we're in the 9th week of flying, and we're adding 1 aircraft per week, but we will have, as an impact from COVID, by the end of this year, of course, a very significant reduction in capacity, passengers, revenue, like all others. I think there's nobody there anymore who says that that was not the hardest crisis, or is the hardest crisis our industry has seen.
I think we were supposed to see each other actually in Brussels in early March at the A4E event, and then you suddenly had to turn around and head back because how bad it hit. So I think you're right. You were right at the forefront of this in your operations. And when did it finally hit home how serious this was going to be? Because I think even in early to mid-March, it wasn't absolutely clear just how deep and long this was going to last.
No. Also for us, it wasn't clear. But what we saw was an increase in drop in bookings. But what was more worrying was the increase in the no-show rate. As we were serving Milan, for example, the no-show rate went within weeks up to 70%. So the passengers were just not turning up anymore. And that was also the time when we said it doesn't make sense to fly. And Latvia took a very good decision by saying they stop all international traffics. And that was then also us stopping total operations. It was going very fast, very dramatic. And at that time, we didn't know what would come. I think the same fears then was everywhere in Europe about COVID. The uncertainty about what would that virus do to us, and nobody. And I think today we still don't know really how it will develop. But what we see now, we learned all in this crisis. We have started operations. We've taken a lot of measures before we started. And here we are now, 9 weeks after starting again, climbing back to where we once were. But it was pretty dramatic, I think, for everybody when the decision was taken, okay, we reduce flying for most of them, and in our case, to stop completely.
So how are you now positioning the airline to, the operations and the network as the markets open up? How are you identifying how many aircraft to bring back, the rate, and which markets to move back into?
When I look at the day when the top management team stayed over the last over all this time in the headquarter, we were working from the headquarter. We closed the headquarter, made like a hospital out of it, had COVID tests every week, everybody, all the 11 people, and we then said, what would we need to do to start flying again? And the first thing was to secure funds for the future. That was something we did at the very beginning. The Latvian state, as a shareholder, will inject 250 million. So with that, we could then plan of what we would fly, and we took a decision, first of all, on health and safety, anticipating what it would be like if you would go back to the air, and a little of the help you got from repatriation flights, because there you saw what kind of equipment you were using by having the suits for the cabin crew, the masks for the passengers, and all the safety measures, the disinfection of the aircraft. So from all of this, we tried to build a product for the restart, and that product we have today. First of all, the aircraft is disinfected, but also we have different procedures for boarding. We issue a face masks and disinfection wipes to every passenger. And we had to change ticket types. The way how you book a ticket, especially in the low-cost world, was that there were tickets available which you couldn't change. That is something which has changed. We have new ticket types where every ticket can be changed because passengers just need that today when they fly, because there's so much uncertainty, different countries not opening their borders. All of the knowledge we had at the time, we took and then started operations with just 4 aircraft to be able to oversee what we're doing. And today, every day and every week, once formally, we change the schedule, which is also something very unusual for a scheduled airline.
And so when you were immediately prior to the grounding, how many aircraft were you flying in the fleet in total, roughly?
We had 38 aircraft, and we then started with 4. We're adding 1 per week. We could add 2 per week in our own plan, but we grounded the turboprop fleet, 12, and the Boeing fleet forever. So we will not use these aircraft anymore. So if everything would now come back very fast, then we would not have enough aircraft to operate, because we will have by the end of the year only an Airbus A220 fleet, and also for the future going forward. That was one of the decisions we took 3 years ahead of plan, to only now focus on that 1 aircraft type.
So you've only got, so you had 38 aircraft in total before the grounding. How many A220s will you have at the end of the year flying?
25, because we already have 22, but we will take delivery of another 3. So 25 Airbuses will be flying end of this year.
Okay, so there's 3 more coming this year.
Yeah.
So did you contemplate deferring those aircraft, or have you always stuck with the schedule on those?
We have changed the schedule also going forward in the next years. We have reduced the total amount of aircraft coming in, but to be in 2023 at the same number than we were before COVID, which is 50 aircraft. But we had to change the delivery schedule for this year and for next year and for the following year to reflect the impact of COVID to our network.
So what assumptions are you making when you're looking at the way you bring the fleet back and the way that you expand the network? It's very difficult for anybody at the moment, given that there's so much. There's some key dependencies that you have no control over, and it's very geographically based. So how does an airline like yours plot that short to medium term plan? It must be quite a challenge.
It is very challenging, and I have to say they're doing miracles and wonders in our network planning department, because we have 69 routes this summer. We said, okay, we will start from all 3 Baltic capitals at the same time, and we had some support because there was a Baltic bubble created for travel where we were flying domestic only within the Baltics. So that was the start. And then we looked at our key routes, and we rolled out a plan where every week we're adding a destination which once was there. And you would normally do that by saying what were our strongest routes, and then you would roll out these routes. We did exactly this, but then the reality kicked in, and still kicks in every day, that a lot of our top routes you can still not serve. For example, Stockholm, Sweden, we cannot serve. It was one of the top routes, Moscow, St. Petersburg. These routes are not, we can't serve them. So therefore we are rolling forwards and replacing routes we can't serve then with routes which would have maybe then be in the following week. But what we did a plan, what would be open until the end of the year, and we just replace one of the destinations with another one. And that's how we started 9 weeks ago. And this week, for example, we're opening Keflavik, Madrid, Nice, and a domestic route, Liepaja. And next week, there's new routes coming. There comes a time, 1st of August, where Moscow is again there to be open, because we had to postpone it due to a NOTAM issued by Russia. If on the 1st of August Moscow cannot be opened, we again will bring forward one which maybe would have come 2 weeks later, and then put Moscow further back. So that's how every Wednesday we take that decision. But then what we have opened, as long as it stays open, we continue to serve. If something would close again because of a COVID factor, we did not have that case yet, then we would close it. What we don't do, we don't fly or don't open anything to a critical destination where the COVID numbers are too high. So we reflect that also in our plan going forward.
And presumably, as your fleet is recovered or returned to service, you're still utilizing the aircraft at a lower rate, and presumably the load factors aren't as high as they would have been. So would that be true to say?
Yeah, of course, it's significant lower. So we have 4 aircraft we had 4 aircraft in operation, or now we fly technically 11, but we use 16 for it. One of the reasons is that we have a minimum turnaround time now of 60 minutes because of the disinfection. And yeah, utilization is nowhere where it should be. That is one of the prices you have to pay for that kind of an operation we do. But overall, we decided to take out 40% of the capacity of the year 2020. And we did that in the very beginning by setting up that new business plan. And what we do now, we just follow that new plan with, of course, a surplus of aircraft available. And with that surplus of aircraft, you will never get that utilization, which you would get if you have the fleet in full flying.
So from your perspective, do you see the same sort of recovery path that other businesses and other industries are talking about, that it's going to be 2 to 3 years really before AirBaltic is back where it would have been at the end of last year or the beginning of this year?
We will be technically back in 2022 if let's say we follow our business plan, that we see again the same revenue numbers and passenger numbers. One of the reasons is that we are focusing on a different equipment now with the Airbus A220 and not having the turboprops anymore. We're having an advantage there, because the number of routes we serve will be probably the same, but with less frequency. But as we are not flying the smaller turboprops anymore, we are offering more capacity on the individual routes with less frequency. So we think we'll be back 2022 with what we had before. But in between, yes, we will be not doing what we were supposed to do. And I guess that is in line with everybody else. As we don't fly really long haul, we have long routes, but not long haul. I think we have an advantage at the moment because that part of the business is really not working at the moment. Short haul within Europe and also rebuilding the hub function in Riga is working for us at the moment. 9 weeks into flying again, we are satisfied. Actually, we're a little bit above what we wanted to achieve, and we're monitoring every week. And we see now in some of the European states, again, more infections. So therefore, that could have an impact on individual destinations. But overall, what we see is it's a different segment of passengers, different people flying, but passengers are booking tickets again and flying. And I think we will see towards the end of the year also business travel to come back, if we do not have several countries going back into a more severe COVID situation.
And has the downsizing of operations had a longer term impact on your staffing, your employment levels? So, have you had to make permanent layoffs?
As we had we decided to stop on the 17th of March all operations. We also decided together with our staff to reduce our staff at that time by 40%. We have executed the termination mutual agreements with 97% of the staff to leave the company before we started operations again. So we're probably one of the few airlines in Europe which have nobody on board who is not who fears about his job, because we have already the staff level which we wanted to have. And what we're doing now, we gave a re-employment guarantee. As we are growing back, we are re-employing, but we have nobody on board who thinks that he might lose his job. We have done that before we started scheduled operations again.
Well, thank you, Martin. Just by way of wrap, we just have just over a minute left. Would you say that you're cautiously optimistic now for the business, assuming there's no more unknowns that appear in the coming months, that the market will actually start to recover and we'll see quite a good pace?
Actually, I am optimistic, because if you go at a slow pace, we will work ourselves, our industry, out of this crisis, as every crisis has an end. I think we have to go slow, and if we go slow, we will work ourselves out of the crisis, maybe by not having a second wave, but by slowing down the growth. But I see us from now on, I see us growing back to once we were. So therefore, I'm optimistic, coming from a very low base.
Well, Martin, I'd like to say thank you again for joining us today. It's been a fascinating insight into the knowns and the unknowns of this weird world we are currently finding ourselves in as an airline industry. But thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thank you very much.